for my first trip to Europe, I felt there is architecture. I tried to be same time artist, simply followed to European tradition. In Japan, an architect think about me. Isozaki is not a typical architect type, but a more art-oriented type of architect. So this, every time I come back here, this town, many people say they dislike of my buildings.
Today, we will learn more about Arata Isozaki, including his biography, personal life and professional history, accomplishments, selected works, design philosophy, and reasons of jury. Biography. Arata Isozaki was born on July 23, 1931 in Oita, Kyushu, Japan. He is a Japanese architect, designer, and tourist. His work spans over half a century and has gone beyond thought, art, design, music, film, theater, and of course architecture, in which they have raised questions spanning multiple ages and multiple disciplines. He has been called Emperor of Japanese Architecture and an engineer of controversy. For some, he is Japan's guerrilla architect for defying conventions, challenging the status quo, and refusing to establish a brand. Japanese architect Arata Isozaki is known for using bold, exaggerated forms and inventive detailing. Personal life and professional history. He was 14 years old when the nuclear bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He quoted, "When I was old enough to begin an understanding of the world, my hometown was burned down. Across the shore, the atomic bomb were dropped on Hiroshima, so I grew up near ground zero. It was in complete ruins, and there was no architecture, no buildings, and not even a city. Only barracks and shelters surrounded me. So my first experience of architecture was the void of architecture, and I began to consider how people might rebuild their homes and cities." Isozaki studied with 1987 Pritzker Prize laureate Kenzo Tange at the Department of Architecture in the Faculty of Engineering at the University of Tokyo from 1950 to 1954. Isozaki graduated in 1954 and continued working with Tange as a graduate student at the university and then in his firm from 1954 to 1963. Even though Isozaki established his own practice in 1963, he did not disassociate himself from his mentor, continuing to design occasionally for Tange into the 1970s. This attitude speaks of his work and also of Japanese practices that stress collaboration and cooperation rather than competition among professionals. He later on established Arata Isozaki and Associates in 1963 after the Allied occupation when Japan had regained its sovereignty and was seeking physical rebuilding amidst political, economic, and cultural uncertainty from World War II. In order to find the most appropriate way to solve these problems, I could not dwell upon a single style. Change became constant. Paradoxically, this came to be my own style. Nearly all the leading 20th century Japanese designers have attempted to synthesize indigenous traditions with Western forms, materials, and technology. Isuzaki's style has in fact been a series of modes that have come as a response to these influences. As a young architect, he was loosely associated with metabolism, a movement founded in Japan in 1960. However, Isozaki minimized his connections to this group, seeing the metabolist style as overly utilitarian in tone. By contrast, in the 1960s, Isuzaki's work featured dramatic forms made possible through the employment of steel and concrete, but not limited aesthetically by those materials. His designs of branch banks for the Fukuoka Mutual are characteristic of his early phase of Isuzaki's career. The Oita Branch Bank 1966 is the representative of the said group. Its powerful cantilevered upper stories are more characteristic of his English contemporary, James Stirling, than of any of his fellow Japanese architects. In the 1970s, Isuzaki's architecture became more historical in its orientation, suggesting a connection with the postmodern movement of Europe and the United States. His sources included classical Western architects. These connections Isozaki did acknowledge, and his work of the 1970s represents a mature synthesis of formal, functional, and technical consideration, an example of which is his Fujimi Country Club, Oita City, constructed in 1973, which displays the love of pure form that also characterizes 18th century French neoclassicism. Another French principle, architecture parlante, which is an architecture that beseeks its function, is also at work at Fujimi by massing the building in the shape of a question mark. Later, his Western influences were decidedly Mannerist, with Romano and Michelangelo replacing the classicists as sources. Isuzaki's Tsukuba City Center of 1979 to 1983, located in Ibaraki, is a complex of buildings clearly indebted of Michelangelo's Campidoglio in Rome, but not all limited by it. Building outside of Japan. This newfound fascination with what postmodern guru Robert Venturi called complexity and contradiction coincided with Isasaki's interest in building outside of his native country. His Los Angeles County Museum of Contemporary Art may be the best known structure by a Japanese designer in America. Isazaki's popularity and prestige as an architect are reflected in the commissions he took throughout the US and Europe. He was part of the exclusive architects enlisted by Disney to design buildings throughout the US. His creation stands just outside Orlando. Isozaki also contributed in IBA Berlin 1987, where the world-famous architects gathered for the urban renewal of Berlin. He designed a residential building called the Isozaki House, Block 33, at the residential park development at the Berlin Museum. Designing for sports, on the other hand, Isozaki is also known for his $100 million structure called the Sandhordy Sports Palace, which was designed for the 1992 Olympics. Accomplishments. Isazaki's excellence has been recognized in his native country and around the world. One of the honors he received was the Asahi Award, given to individuals who make significant and lasting contributions to Japanese culture. He is also a multiple winner of the annual prize awarded by the Japan Architectural Association. Since the early 1970s, there have been several one-man shows honoring Isazaki's work, including a London retrospective during 1976. Nippon Telegraph and Telephone Corporation in Tokyo announced plans for a new gallery with an opening exhibit by Isozaki called the Mirage City. Isozaki was also a visiting professor at several Japanese and American institutions, including the University of California at LA, Columbia University, and the University of Hawaii. Besides from these, Arata Isozaki is instantly recognizable by his distinctive style of dress, which made him appear on the cover of New York Times Magazine in 1986. Additionally, he is the recipient of several awards and recognitions such as the following. Therefore, it is safe to say that the 87-year-old architect boasts multiple projects of different scales all over the world, from Tokyo and Shanghai to Barcelona and Qatar. Let's take a look at the three designs out of an immense list of Arata Isuzaki's projects. Qatar National Convention Center, located at Doha, Qatar, opened last December of 2011, is a four-story convention center with a 250 by 115 footprint. The conceptual design of the building incorporates in the main facade a huge organic tree-shaped structure that symbolizes the cider tree. Arata Isozaki, with its design of giant columns that support the roof of the building, refers to Sidrat al-Muntaha, an Islamic sacred tree that is believed to symbolize the end of the seventh heaven. The theater was designed as a box inside another box to isolate outside interference. Solar panels are located on the roof, while the rectangular facade of the center is made of glass and steel. Approximately 60,000 square meters of reinforced concrete and 90,000 square meters of structural steel have been used for its construction. Arc Nova, located at Matsushima, Japan. Arc Nova is a concert hall for 500 people, inflatable and transportable. The architect Arata Isozaki has created this amazing space with the artist Anish Kapoor that toured the regions most affected by the earthquake and subsequent tsunami in Japan. Its name means New Ark, refers to the vessel that Noah used during the flood to save his family and animals. According to the Old Testament, this architecture saves the music and culture of the terrible natural disaster that hit the country in 2011. Due to the highly elastic plastic used for its membrane, it is an easy removable inflatable structure that will travel by truck bringing music. With all this said experience of Arata Isozaki, he was finally awarded as the Pritzker Prize laureate for year 2019. The reasons of his accomplishment was because of his long and versatile career. He is an architect who did not follow trends yet evolved constantly over the years. If we look at the early works, compare them to the middle works, and then finally the most recent ones, we see that they are all quite different. The one thing that brings them together is his great searching for meaning in architecture and also his attention to those who will be occupying and inhabiting his buildings. Possessing a profound knowledge of architectural history and theory and embracing the avant garde, he never merely replicated the status quo but challenged it. Second, for his generosity in supporting young architects all around the world, he sets an example for others in this field. Finally, the jury brought out the point that he was probably one of the first Japanese architects to connect the East and the West in a sincere and profound way. This led to Isozaki building and undertaking architecture throughout the world in many countries, and even in his most recent project in Milan, Italy, with his local firm. Truly, there is a testament to a great architect with a very long career.